Hey, how's it going? Welcome to the Football Diary podcast on this festive season. Merry Christmas to anyone that does celebrate. We're here to talk about Boxing Day's action, which has been, once again, absolutely sensational in the Premier League. Starting off with Chelsea against Fulham and a fantastic comeback last gasp win for Fulham. Newcastle 3, Villa 0 and a red card really affecting the game there, I think it's fair to say. Wolves 2, United 0, a red card affecting the game there, but did it really? Was it always going to be that way? Probably. And Nottingham Forest beating Tottenham to cement their place in the top three even further. It's becoming a Nottingham Forest podcast at this point, isn't it? The amount we talk about them. But I'm joined by Myles and Dave today, which is the first time in a while we've been together. How are you, Myles, first of all?
Oh, you asked me that after we just mentioned a 3-0 loss for Villa. That's not really a fair question for me, mate.
Yeah, I think, well, if I ask Dave the same, he's probably going to be just as festive, aren't you, after Man United's result? How are you, mate?
I'm all right. Flagging a little bit, I think, from the festivities over the last couple of days and probably one too many beers drank. But
drowning your sorrows.
I'm here and that's what counts.
Oh man, it's been a hectic schedule, hasn't it? Obviously your personal lives as well as on the pitch too, but Boxing Day football is always a mixed bag as well, and this was no exception really. The Premier League table's looking ever more unpredictable. These results have not changed that at all. Now we're recording this on the 27th of December. Today's games haven't yet been played, so this is purely about Boxing Day really, so it could change again by the time we finish recording. But let's start with Chelsea Fulham, shall we? Fulham winning 2-1 in the end with a sensational turnaround victory, a last gasp, a couple of goals as well. In a game which Chelsea were, it felt like, on top for the majority with a Cole Palmer opener, Myles, and then pretty much in cruise control, it felt, for the majority of that. And probably should have killed the game off, but they didn't. And Fulham came back and stole a sensational win.
Yeah, Fulham have just been superb lately, haven't they? We've given a lot of credit to them as a club and a team and looked at some of the individuals that are really affecting those performances. But actually, I think what you saw in this game was there's some depth in that squad and there are a lot of players that they can rely on that are going to help them get big performances and big results like this. I mean, we talked last time about Anthony Robinson and how instrumental he's been. We talked about how good we thought their business was in the summer. And then in this game, there were more players that stood out. Harry Wilson back off the bench, did incredibly well to get a goal. Rodrigo Muniz off the bench, got a goal. Ryan Sessegnon off the bench. Like, you're seeing some depth in this Fulham team now. And even with players like Sander Berg and Smith Rowe out of the team in this game, they're still able to pull off an incredibly good result.
It's not a shock result though either, is it, Dave? Because Fulham have been playing so well, but Chelsea have previously been, I think it's 15 games unbeaten prior to this in all competition. So they're in fantastic form. And, you know, this is something that we've really talked about a lot with this Chelsea team. And not only that, but they haven't won Fulham at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League era, I don't think. So it was a shock result in that respect. Yeah, it's been ridiculous, hasn't it? But I think the way Fulham set up, Dave, was kind of designed to make this result happen, really, because they built in like a Nottingham Forest way, really, three at the back with two full-backs bombing forward. That really helped them. And as Myles said, Anthony Robinson was fantastic on one side and Timothy Castagne on the other. Like key weapons for them, weren't they?
Yeah, I think majority of their play does tend to go down the left-hand side, obviously through Anthony Robinson. He's just got that energy to kind of get up and down that flank, hasn't he, all game. I think he's been one of the players of the season so far. I think it's a slightly different balance on that right-hand side. I do think potentially they could be looking at right-hand sided attacker probably in the January transfer window, just to kind of even out that sort of that threat that they've got. But I just think they're real underdogs. I think probably for Europe, to be honest. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, they've gone under the radar a little bit with how they've operated, and probably in the shadows of the likes of Forest, Bournemouth at times as well, who've done really well at times this season as well. So, I just think that in this particular game, they definitely flooded that midfield area as well. And actually made Chelsea struggle, who I thought probably struggled a little bit in Lavia's absence. I think that midfield, when he's not in it, isn't quite the same. And like we mentioned before the game, I think Fulham had the better of the possession, which is probably something you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, well, even like Calvin Bassey venturing forward was a surprise to see. He marauded into the area at one point, didn't he? But yeah, so many players stood out in this game for Fulham, including Leno as well in goals. I think he saved them on so many occasions, didn't he? But a bit of controversy, Myles. Was it controversial? Was it the first goal, I think, the equaliser, where I think Pedro Neto went down, didn't he, under a robust challenge from maybe Iwobi, I think it was. No, it was Traore, I think, wasn't it? You're never going to win that battle if that's the case. And he seemed to stay down forever and even had treatment after the goal had been scored, which I think is just comical. Like, there was no contact to his face at all. But I don't think he can have any complaints because he was too weak in the challenge. The cross went in, the equaliser went in, and that kind of galvanised Fulham quite nicely, didn't it?
Yeah, I think he was trying to play the system a little bit and give the ref the idea that it was a head injury to break up play a little bit when it's late on and another team are pressing, but it was never going to work. But you mentioned there like the physicality that Fulham have, and I think that really paid off for them. I mean, we saw last season how influential Paulinho was in this midfield. They lost him in the summer and brought in Sander Berg. He's been excellent. He was out in this game, but Sasa Lukic came in. Iwobi has been fantastic in that midfield area and feels like he's really like rejuvenated his career. And Fulham are not afraid of anyone right now, which is why they can achieve a feat like this, beat Chelsea at Stamford Bridge for the first time in 45 years, even though they're in incredible form right now. Fulham didn't seem intimidated by them, even when they'd gone a goal down. So I think that presence of mind shows what Marco Silva is doing with this squad, and that he has motivated them to think, no, keep playing to that final whistle, keep playing late on, and we can push for things like Europe. It wouldn't surprise me at all. It's a good squad.
Really good squad, yeah. I think Chelsea will see, well, they've said actually they're not title contenders, so they don't see this as points lost in the title race. But I think you have to see it that way because there's no one closer than them to Liverpool. So it's a shame that they couldn't keep up the momentum. But I think Cole Palmer said, we were never going to win every game, and they've been on a really good run. These kind of results are bound to happen at some point, just not to Liverpool at the minute, it seems. But Fulham, on the other hand, flying and look kind of really good for Europe. And I think there's a few teams in that position, really, isn't there, including Newcastle United, Myles, who we'll move on to next. 3-0 winners against Aston Villa. A bit of a bogey team, Newcastle, aren't they, for Villa lately? Before we talk about the game and some of the quality that Newcastle showed, we have to address, really, the thing that kind of affected the game most, which was John Duran's red card. So early in the game, it influenced kind of the way Villa could set up beyond that, really. They couldn't really play to the game plan they wanted. What did Duran do wrong, do you think, that the referee saw? Because it was quite rash to give that red card, but he's quite quick to kind of go, yes, that's a sending off. I think that's part of the problem, though, because if you see it a few times, you can see him roll on his ankle and kind of fall into him almost, and it looks worse than it is, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, first time I saw it, I thought, that's a red. He's done something stupid there. I think it didn't help that earlier in the game, he'd already kind of lost his head a little bit. We know that he's kind of a fiery character anyway, so you're not necessarily shocked by the idea of a little kick out at someone. But actually, when you watch it back, it is harsh. It's really, really harsh because there's not really anywhere for him to go. His foot comes down and he actually tries to lift his weight off Share. You can see that second contact he makes with him with his right foot. He doesn't plant his foot because he's really aware the man's there. He tries to try and lift it again to make sure he doesn't come down on him. It's just an unfortunate coming together. And I think Emery's post-match comments were really interested. He talked about how the referee should have taken more time. The referee should have viewed it on the monitor. You've got that luxury with VAR that you can slow those things down. And actually, it seemed really heavily like the referee reacted based on everyone else's reaction on the pitch. And he kind of jumped to the idea that it had to be a red because everyone seemed so disgraced by it. But it was just an unfortunate coming together, really. I mean, it looks like from one angle there is a bit of emotion to bring his right foot back in, but regardless, there's nowhere for it to go. I think he's just off balance. So I think, he can feel hard done by that. And he was clearly incredibly frustrated as he went down the tunnel, and it ruined the game for Villa. I mean, to be honest, they did a good job of ruining it for themselves 90 seconds in anyway, and I'm sure we'll come to the rest of the game in a moment. But that decision will definitely be one that damages Villa, and I think they'll probably appeal the decision to make sure Duran's not out for 3 games after this.
Yeah, damage is done though, isn't it, in the game? And it's so early on, it's affected the result quite a lot. But Dave, do you reckon that Villa probably should have tightened up a little bit more after that? Because for me, they were so, I don't know, not naive, just a little bit sloppy. They were giving away loads of possession and passes. They didn't keep it quite so tight at the back, even though they were up against it against Newcastle.
Oh, you could see that in the last 2 goals. You could see
Emery's frustration, couldn't you, as well, on the touchline? He was yelling at his players to keep it tight, and they just weren't listening.
Yeah, we could see it the second 2 goals. Obviously, sloppy mistakes, trying to build out from the back, particularly the Joelinton goal. Obviously, even the first goal, really, it's just a lack of urgency, closing down the shot. And obviously, it just so easy for Anthony Gordon. You could see how frustrated Ezri Konsa was, and as he saw his reaction to the goal. It's just, it's one of those things I think which Villa have been guilty of a little bit times this season, and in the past when we've given them so much praise for their defensive shape and the solidity, and it was absent. It's been absent more so this season in comparison to last season. Yeah, it's going to be something to ponder. I don't think he'll dwell on it too much, and it's something I've mentioned with this Villa team since Emery's been in charge. They've been able to react, from in positions like this. So, like you say, they've found it difficult against Newcastle, haven't they? This last couple of seasons. Yeah. But there's plenty of big games. I think the thing with the league at the moment is you can have a bad result against one team, and then the next you'll go on a run. And I think there's just so many unexpected results at the moment, particularly if you look. We were mentioning before the pod between sort of like fourth position and down to even as far as 14th. Yeah. I mean, it's so tight there. Yeah. That a couple of results going your way can completely transform your season.
With that in mind, then, Myles, after this result, what are your feelings? How are you feeling? Are you optimistic still? I mean, are you angry at the performance, or are you just not going to dwell on it too much?
I don't think I'd say I'm angry at the performance, but it's one that happens with Villa every now and again, where once things go badly, it kind of spirals, and you saw their heads drop a little bit. That's why we were giving possession away so cheaply, and it felt like we kind of conceded that the game was done very, very early. So if you think about some of the changes they made, he brought Morgan Rogers off at a point where he looked like the most effective player Villa had going forward. He was beating Newcastle players with such ease and driving through their midfield. But it was like they acknowledged, well, he's on 4 yellows. We don't want him suspended for the Brighton game, and we're already going to be missing Duran. So we may as well take him off now. And it was like we gave up at that point. We conceded defeat, and that was really frustrating. And then the sloppiness of the passing kind of does the same thing. And it just felt like it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. We go into St James's Park, we're going to lose. And the fact they scored after 90 seconds really doesn't help. The fact that Newcastle have hit some really good form right now doesn't help. Dave mentions a couple of results and all of a sudden you're shooting right up the table. Newcastle are a perfect example of that. Villa were an example of that a couple of weeks ago with some really good results. They've then lost this game, they dropped to 9th. The problem is they capitulate like that and the goal difference takes a battering, and we've got the lowest goal difference of anyone in the top 12. So when you're talking about it being really tight between 5th and 14th, well, the goal difference is going to matter then, isn't it? And we've got to be really careful of that. Like you say, not letting the game get away from us. So that silly goal at the end where Onana just falls asleep and passes the ball straight to Joel Linton, that little margin there can be the thing that makes a big difference in your season. It's really frustrating.
We've got to give credit to Newcastle, really, because, I mean, before the sending off, they were looking really good anyway. I think they took the game to Villa really well. And Anthony Gordon's goal, Myles, was insane, wasn't it? Really great technique, and he's a player that's blossoming at the minute as well.
Yeah, an incredible finish from him. And you can see that Newcastle were desperate to hold on to him in the summer. There was a lot of talk about other clubs coming in for him. Even Liverpool were mentioned. And they'll be fighting that battle for a long time, I think, because he's a young player with a really high ceiling. And he was excellent. Yeah, he gave Matty Cash a really difficult time. And I think, given where Newcastle are at right now, that confidence is really flowing through a lot of their players. You saw it in their midfield. I talked about that last week, and it was the same again this week. Tonali was excellent, and Isak's just on that hot streak that he goes on where he's going to score a lot of goals in a row. But Gordon, he seemed like the standout, really. He was the most threatening player that they had for a long time in the game.
There's a couple of players that really stood up as well. I think Tonali's been great, isn't he? Like you said, the last few games too. But Isak, Dave, I think that's 5 games in a row he's scored in now in the Premier League, which is unreal. He's such a great finisher, isn't he? And if only he can stay fit, he's going to be a huge goal scorer, you can imagine, in the Premier League if he stays in the league, and I hope he does. But he's 1 goal behind Andy Cole's Premier League record. And I always thought Cole was up there with like this insurmountable figure, but Isak's there already despite his injury problems. He's wicked, isn't he?
That's the big if, isn't it? If he can stay fit. And he's had a couple of periods over the last couple of years where he's hit this, real hot streak, and it comes to the end by just getting injured for a few weeks, and then it's obviously building your fitness back up, getting back into form. I just think he's such a talented player, and I think when he's on it, there's no better forward, I don't think, in the league, to be honest, in terms of you look at his all-round sort of capability and ability, skill set. I think he's such a menace to defenders. I think he's so difficult to defend against.
Another thing that seems to be difficult to defend against, Dave, is in swinging corners if you're Manchester United, isn't it, right? I mean, the technique that was involved again for this corner was clearly something that Wolves had worked on and took notes from Spurs the previous week. Different goalkeeper this time as well, been caught out. How are United letting this happen defensively? Sum up your feelings, Dave, because Wolves 2, United 0 didn't seem a surprising result, I think, once the game started, and even the sending off didn't impact it hugely. So what are your thoughts?
No, to be honest, even I'd say before the red card, and obviously Wolves went ahead, it was a very uneventful first half, to be honest, and a tough watch, a real tough watch, and it's something we've said all season when watching United. No real urgency from them, the lack of sort of lack of endeavour at times. I think just no clue, I think, of how to create opportunities. We just look all at sea at times in that area, and it's just, again, how many corners are we going to concede from? How many set pieces are we going to concede from by the end of the season? Because I'm dreading it's going to be in the 20s, even the 30s. How many goals we've conceded? Yeah. It's ridiculous, and it's not something new to us. Like, this was happening under Ten Hag last season. So it's something that Amorim's not had the chance to rectify, come in and solve this issue. So,
this is something, though, I've been saying to other United fans on Blue Sky is, like, this, you say that it takes time, but like Vitor Pereira's come in and he's won 2 on the bounce with Wolves. So, like, what's the reason? What's the excuse? I know it's a big rebuild job at United, but tactically, surely he needs to try and be less stubborn, Amorim, and go, I haven't got the players to do what I want to do right now. I need to adapt a little bit more to the opposition.
I do think there's a mentality thing to it. It feels like when we suffer, where something goes against us in a game, it hits us massively and impacts those players. And that is not something that I think you can solve so easily. You look at Xerxes defending, particularly from is it last week against Spurs?
Yeah.
Awful. Yeah. It was defensively terrible. Again this week, I just think some of the players and the way it doesn't seem like there's an aggression and a will to defend the goal at all costs from every single player on that pitch.
I think that was the difference, though, and that's the difference between United and the rest of the teams that we lose against, is that the other team just has to show up and play really well, and United just crumble.
I don't think it's the case of that. I just think it's a case of
desire.
They know that they can get at United. They don't fear them at all. They've watched teams, stroll to wins over the last, look how far we can go back, years and years now. This isn't a team that are feared by opponents. This is a team that everybody knows they can go to Old Trafford even and get a win. And
you're lacking those leaders, though, again. It feels like the same old conversation. Like, you look at this starting 11, Bruno's meant to be a captain, gets himself sent off for 2 stupid challenges. The second one he really didn't need to make in that way. No leadership there. Rashford's meant to be a massive leader at the club. He's been there a long time. He's been dropped from the last 4 games. The corner, how is Harry Maguire or Lissandro Martinez letting 2 Wolves players completely surround the goalkeeper? They're going over and getting themselves involved and getting him cleared out. Because you saw that not one person seemed to have the awareness of what was actually happening in their box. And that's where you need a leader on the pitch to go, come on, let's get this game by the scruff of its neck. Wolves are doing well under Vitor Pereira, fine, but they're still a team that have been in the bottom 3 all season. Like, they're not the best team in the world. They've got a couple of good players, but defensively you can get at them. United didn't even try, it felt like, because no one's there driving them forward. They've got no one to lead this team.
No, I think even the goalkeeper, I think I've seen him been defended quite a bit on social media saying that he's been blocked off, but just be a bit more...
Oh, no, it's his fault.
I think you've got to push them out of the way. But it's happening all the time, defensively and from the attacking team in the box. And I think referees have definitely been a bit more lenient, I feel, in the penalty area when set pieces are being taken. We've got this thing of fleeting now that's come in, and there's definitely a grey area there with things as well. I just feel like you've got to clear your box, and if you've got to get your body in there as a keeper, you just got to be more dominant and just take control of the situation.
Yeah, agreed.
That was his problem, though. He tried to do that in a weird way. Like, he grabbed Doherty around his waist rather than trying to shove him off, and does it at exactly the wrong time, which meant he didn't have time to then jump for it. It was such a weird process from them. Like, you're right, Dave. If you're a goalkeeper and you jump for that ball in between two players and you miss it, you might get a foul in the Premier League. But as soon as you've then not gone for the ball because you wrap your arms round the defender in front of you, well, you've lost it. It was poor decision making, and it's weird because Onana actually has been your best player this season until Amorim came in, and now he seems to be struggling all of a sudden. I don't know how that's happened.
I don't know where Amorim kind of goes from here now, really, with his setup and whether he persists. But I think he's learning a lot about the squad and some of the players in the squad. I think he kind of knows who he wants to get rid of now, and I think that's the only kind of silver lining for me, is that this is an experiment in seeing who we can rely on and who's got the desire and who's got the ability, who's past it. I think there's a lot of players that fall into that category of being either past it or not good enough.
This mess that's ongoing, this is down to the hierarchy. That you can't put it down to anyone else but who's at the very top of the tree.
Dave, we look at our podcast from 3 years ago and we're saying the same thing.
No, but this
aren't we?
For instance, that it should have been, obviously you were saying Myles at 10 should have been let go in the summer, and that should have been the end of that. Now, obviously, Amorim's looking to kind of instill this new system and this new way of playing in the very middle of a season, and you can't help but feel sorry for him, and it's all down to the indecision from the top, really.
Yeah, well, speaking of indecision, one club that's been decisive is Wolves, though, really. I think their decision to get rid of Gary O'Neill and replace him with someone like Vitor Pereira, who we didn't really have much of a clue about what kind of coach he was. We didn't really know much about him. We'd heard things, but he seems to have kind of drilled a no-nonsense approach into Wolves, hasn't he, Myles? He's made them just more buoyant with a spring in their step.
Yeah, I really liked his comments after the game. He was asked what he's done at Wolves since he's been there, and he said not a lot. He said, look, they're a good squad. There's some good players here. The main thing I've told him is to have some confidence in themselves because they are good. And it's such a basic thing to say, but it is one of the fundamentals that seems to be lacking from a lot of teams right now. Just having the confidence that you can go out there and get a result. And Wolves have shown that in the last couple of games. There was so much talk about their defensive fragility at the start of the season that, again, it became something that almost seemed to be on their own minds that they were going to do that. And then you look at someone like Matheus Cunha, and he oozes confidence. He's willing to take things on. He's willing to try these things. And if you can instill that confidence in the rest of your squad, then there are some really good players going forward in this Wolves team. I think United can feel a little bit hard done by the fact that Cunha even played in this game, and now he's got a 5-game suspension for something that happened before this match.
Yeah.
But it should have come down to those margins for him, really. And Wolves would be really proud of this result, and the fact that they've got 2 wins on the bounce gives them something to build on now as well and kick on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, a team that's kicking on as well, which we'll move on to now, is Nottingham Forest. Again, we talk about them weekly, it feels like, at the minute, but beating Tottenham easily, I think it's fair to say, 1-0. I think they were pretty explosive on only less than 30% of the possession as well in this game, with a deserved victory once again. And a few players that stood out for me. Obviously, we're talking about Murillo and Milenkovic, and they were outstanding again. Matt Sells deserves huge credit for how he's part of that defensive rock as well, Dave. But I think Anthony Elanga in this game really stood out. I think he was absolutely class. And again, as a United fan, I keep thinking to myself, what is he doing at Forest? He should have been at United, shouldn't he, really?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've got a bit of a jinx in me. I was saying the other week about James Maddison and how he disappointed me, and then obviously went and scored a couple of goals, didn't he, in the next game. And now I mentioned the other week about Anthony Elanga, and I thought how he's had a slow start to the season, and now he's scored 3 goals in his last 3 games.
Dave, can you have a chat about Ollie Watkins, please, mate?
The Dave effect,
yeah, he's just electric at times, and I think when you see him in full motion, you see it for the goal. And let's not forget, Udogie's not a slouch by any means at all, or made him look slow. He's got to be one of the fastest in the league by far, and I think that finish is so underrated. You've got to think how quick he's running, and to have that element of control to stroke it into the corner. I just think he did so well, and it's great to see him doing well. I think he suits this Forest side perfectly. I think he's been used quite well by Nuno in some games. He's preferred other front men or to pack, I think, the midfield a little bit more tightly. But I think for particular games, probably where they're anticipating to have much less of the ball and they're looking to hurt teams on the counter, I think he suits it perfectly. And we saw it to devastating effect in this game. And I think Spurs really struggled actually against them in the transition.
Absolutely classic Forest breakaway, that goal though, wasn't it? And as I say, only 29.7% of the possession. It didn't matter. They were just waiting for the opportunity, and they had a few kind of breakaways where it could have worked out the same way. And that's their kind of method at the minute. And a few Forest fans have said to me, I've seen it on our YouTube channel as well, that they don't like that kind of like pragmatism where they sit back and absorb and then counter. But it's really hard to defend against when the players doing the counter and are so good, isn't it, Myles? And this game was laced with narrative as well. Obviously, Nuno Espirito Santo against Tottenham with a point to prove. Brennan Johnson and Jed Spence going back to the City ground as well. Obviously, Spence himself getting sent off. Yeah, that went really well. So it felt like a kind of game where Forest had a lot to prove. What do you think Nuno will be feeling like at the minute?
You'd be elated because this was the perfect opposition for that Forest counter, wasn't it? You know that Spurs are going to continue to play that same philosophy, that high line, and leave space in behind for a counter-attack at a time where they're missing some of their key defenders as well. So they've rotated their squad, brought in some players that aren't necessarily as quick to get back, and let Forest get in behind them. Like it was made for a Forest win, this game. Spurs have been so inconsistent this season anyway, and Forest, on the other hand, have found various ways to hurt teams. So they were really well set up for this. Nuno did an excellent job. I think that's the encouraging thing about Forest. Yes, they have lightning pace in someone like Alanga, and Hudson-Odoi can get forward and they can be excellent on a counter-attack. But they can also build up really slowly with Gibbs-White and Wood. So they have these different avenues now that they can exploit teams with, and Spurs are definitely a team that are there to be exploited. It felt like it's an excellent win, but it's not a shock. This isn't one that,
not at all,
any other season this would probably be top of our running order, but we put it in towards the end because Forest deserve the credit. It's a great result, but of course they beat Spurs at home. Like that's where this season is going. It's worth remembering though that last season Forest finished 17th, and I think mathematically stayed up on the last game of the season or the game before.
Yeah, it was very close, wasn't it?
And they're third now. Like that is such an incredible turnaround, and we talk about it every week, obviously. And other than the week when they beat Villa, where I'm a bit bitter about it, we give them a lot of credit for it as well. But this game is just a perfect example of where they're at right now. That this was just a routine win, really.
Shades of Emery's Aston Villa last season, I think it's fair to say. That much of a turnaround. It's been impressive so far. 4 wins in a row they've got now. So, yeah, super impressive. A team that can't buy a win in the minute still is Manchester City. Should we talk about their game against Everton and also how well Everton kind of absorbed that pressure? Because, yeah, City dominated possession, took the lead quite early on with the Bernardo Silva goal. We're knocking on the door loads. We're really poor at finishing. And Everton basically dealt with most of what came their way, didn't they?
Mm. Jordan Pickford, he's just excellent, isn't he? And Everton's defensive record this season has been so strong. I think has he got the most clean sheets in the league this year?
Has he really? I didn't know
he's
that.
Up there. If it's not top, it's up there in the top few. And he's been fantastic, and they really have that foundation. So although we know City are off form at the moment, we know that this is the time that you're desperate to play them. You keep waiting for the game where things turn around and the quality in that squad shines through. And Everton just stopped them. And actually, the most quality we saw on the pitch was from Iliman Ndiaye.
Oof, great goal.
What a goal. That is sensational. Everton deserved the credit for that because I think a lot was made even during the game. The commentators talked a lot about Man City and Man City falling off. I think Ndiaye scored and immediately the talk was, oh, Man City have thrown it away again, rather than going, that's one of the goals of the season. And Everton deserves some credit because Ndiaye has been an excellent signing. And you can see that he's really suiting their attack now. He was bringing them up the pitch. He was keeping hold of the ball, stopping Man City from building things up. And he has that in his locker as well. So good performance from them, really.
Yeah, definitely. Well, since they lost to United, they've beat Wolves 4-0. They drew with Arsenal 0-0, drew with Chelsea 0-0, and obviously now drew with Man City, Dave. So it's a string of really quite unexpected but really resolute defensive performances that's got them these really important points, isn't it?
Yeah, I think since Jared Branthwaite's come back in, I think there's been a theme there that they've definitely looked more assured at the back, and I think they've turned it around. I think we were a little bit worried, weren't we, at the beginning of the season when they were having some looked like they were in turmoil a little bit, to be honest. So I think he's done well to turn it around. Sean Dyche, I think they'll be looking potentially in January to to strengthen that squad further. I think they've made a couple of good. We mentioned some of the acquisitions they made actually in August. They look like they're coming together and getting a little bit more on track, so to speak. But you never know, I suppose, as Everton fans have been fully accustomed to the last few years. But yeah, like you mentioned, Ndiaye, I think he looks like a real player, and I think there'll be some teams probably having a look at him, to be honest.
How do you think Everton fans feel, Myles, about Sean Dyche? Because it's hard to kind of put your finger on whether it's a positive or a negative outlook, because some of the football he plays is super pragmatic, doesn't always use the talent at his disposal for an attacking good. It always seems to be like, don't concede first. So do you think fans are generally happy, especially after the last string of results, or are they still kind of looking at elsewhere who could improve their squad?
I think with the Friedrich Group coming in, and any time that you get new owners, the fan base always thinks about their relationship with the manager and whether Sean Dyche is going to be the man that they want to carry Everton forward. I wouldn't be surprised if whatever the result of this season is, he is moved on in the summer. Not that that would necessarily be the right decision. We've seen a lot of teams do this. I mean, look at West Ham. They moved David Moyes on. They've not necessarily had the most fruitful season so far, even if it is picking up a little bit now. You see teams think that they need to change up the style and bring in someone from the continent that can bring a bit more flair. And it doesn't always work. Everton have survived this long. They've got the new stadium come in and new ownership. They need stability right now. Sean Dyche, for all his faults, if you want attacking football, he brings you stability. And that constant could be really helpful for Everton to help them build and kick on, at least until they know where they're at with this new ownership.
The rest of the performances in the league, Bournemouth 0, Palace 0, keeps Bournemouth in sixth, which is really impressive still. We spoke about them last week. Southampton 0, West Ham 1. Jared Bowen's goals the difference there. And Liverpool 3, Leicester 1. Leicester disposing with Danny Ward in goal after fans backlash. Made an instant improvement, I think, because there was quite a few good saves for their replacement goalkeeper. And the defence just looked better organised, but still Liverpool look absolutely irresistible, don't they? But what of those have you taken, Dave, as anything out of those games that you've seen that you thought, pretty interesting?
Not from those games. I've got a story from Boxing Day results. I've got two family members, my brother-in-law and my stepdad, actually, my father-in-law, should I say, are both Sheffield Wednesday fans. They were 3-0 down at half-time to Middlesbrough. And I said, they were obviously, defeatist. And they said, honestly, probably worth chuck 20 quid on, never know. So they brought it back to 3-3 full time.
Wow.
3-3.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, all for a good turnaround in games and up against it. So, but yeah, I didn't. To be honest, I thought there were some good games in the Premier League. But it's also on Boxing Day, you just don't know what to expect. I think in a lot of games.
Well, Southampton played better, didn't they, Myles? I think
they did. Yeah, they did. I think they were unfortunate. I think there's a few players there that showed some green shoots, and I think if they at least consolidate what they've got in January, they'll get relegated and not be an embarrassment. They might not beat Derby's points record. I don't know. I don't really know what to say for Southampton. I feel for them. They did play better in this game, but they're still going to go down, aren't they? It's worrying that the bottom three are now the promoted three again.
Is it looking ominous? That's what I'm wondering now. Do you think it's getting to that point where there's that clear gap between the bottom three?
I'm not sure. I think United can still get dragged in.
Yeah, arguably. But I see what you mean, though, because, like you say, from fourth place down to even as low as like 15th, there's not a huge amount of points, and if a run could make that gap close. But yeah, I think now that Wolves have climbed out of the bottom three, it does look like a big difference in quality, doesn't it? Because we've seen the best of Wolves now, or something close to the best. And even the best of Ipswich hasn't been good enough, and they've been good at times, So yeah, it is a bit strange. Looking ahead to January then, Myles, shall we have a quick look at like what clubs need and where we sit?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I want to ask you boys, because you talked about United's squad looking like it needs a bit of turnover. I've got a list of players for you, and I want, in a word, do you keep them or do you sell them? Okay. Let's work out what United actually look like by the end of January, right? You ready? Dave, you go first. Rashford?
Sell.
Mike?
Sell.
Bruno?
Keep.
Sell in the summer.
Sell in the summer. I like that. Okay, keep him for a bit longer.
Demote. Keep.
I can't see a space for him in this system. So I think you've got to entertain the idea of selling it.
Interesting. Maguire?
I would say keep. He's a useful squad member.
What a turnaround. I love that for Harry Maguire. Ericsson.
Oh, he's got to go, yeah.
He's going anyway,
past his best,
he?
yeah.
I think he's going, yeah.
Malacia, he's played recently.
Not good enough.
This looks...
It's just
Since he come back from his injury, which, let's be honest, he's been, what was he out for? 2 years nearly, was it?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. He's just, he's looked completely shot. And who do feel for him massively. I feel like his returns come round a little bit too soon. So yeah, I think probably if the money's there. I mean, we only bought him for 14 million. So
you can make that.
If we can
what about
recruit
his compatriot Joshua Zirkzee?
Early days, yeah. I mean, he needs to have time in a team that's functional, and he's just not had that, has he? It's been chaos since he joined.
I just don't think he's got the intensity to suit the way that Amrin wants to play.
He's not good enough.
And
He's definitely not good enough.
I can't see him playing in the striker position. He's just not that. No. He's not that kind of fit. So again, if we can make some of the money back, I think Juve have been linked with him, haven't they?
Hilarious if they are.
I could see him going back to Italy.
Probably can't move him on in January because he's injured. Mason Mount.
Didn't really want him in the first place, if I'm honest. I feel for him, but again, I don't rate him as a midfielder.
I think you've got to look at our medical team probably before you look at Mason Mount and wondering how they got him for his medical. But yeah, probably you probably got to look at moving him on because you just can't stay fit. It's the same with Luke Shaw.
Yeah.
Last one, fan favourite. I think I know the answer to the both of this. You both want to keep him. Anthony?
Oh, mate, just
he played well when he came on yesterday. He played all right.
I mean, I wouldn't say he played all right. He wasn't a disaster, but he's so poor.
The subs that came on, though, were a lot better than what were on the pitch. Like Casemiro. For some reason, he's not been given many minutes of late.
And then the other thing I've got to address, at the start of the season, we made some predictions, some bold, hot takes that we wanted to bring across. Mine has not worked out the way I thought it would, because I forgot something really important. I said, Ange Postecoglou gone by Christmas. And I think I came very close, but I forgot the most Spursy thing in the world and the most Daniel Levy thing in the world is to give him a bit of uncertainty through the January transfer window so you don't have to give him any money, and then sack him right at the end of it and bring a new manager in and don't give him any players. So can I have an extra month on my prediction for Ange Postecoglou to go?
Well, no, because your prediction was twofold.
Can you have an extension?
You said Ange would be gone, and didn't you say that Poch would be back? I don't think that's happening anytime soon.
I did say that, and then he took the America job a couple of weeks later.
So
who saw that coming?
I know. Well, I said Nicholas Fulkrug would be a prolific striker in the Premier League, and
good call.
I don't know if he's still got time to do that, but it's not looking likely, is it?
The way he celebrated West Ham's goal this weekend was very funny as well. He kind of knocked the ball down for Bowen to put it in, obviously, and he ran off and celebrated on his own without kind of realising that Bowen was celebrating the goal himself somewhere else. And then he kind of had to turn around and realise where his West Ham teammates are. So you can see the chemistry he's got there at West Ham. So
slightly awkward. What was your prediction, Dave? Your hot take?
I can't even remember what it was.
Ten Hag to win another trophy, I think it was.
I mean, the way it sounds like both of yours has gone, surely I'm probably not going to book the trend. It's probably terrible as well. We'll have to
dig it from the
Mine was not terrible, by the way. I said Postecoglou gone by Christmas and Spurs are in the bottom half. I think that's a pretty good shout. Thank you very much.
Yeah, not too bad. Anyway, as you probably guessed, that's all we've got time for on this edition of the pod. I say this edition because it's a midweek one, which is rare for us, but it's Boxing Day, so I feel like we had to get all this action in. Join us again.
I remember what my hot take was.
Oh, go on then. You want to embarrass yourself?
Alexander Isak hit 30 goals or more and to be player of the season, which
could happen.
Provide
not that hot a take.
Not that hot, but
what, like me saying that the Netherlands were underdogs for the Euros? Yeah,
shocking. You boys readdress this.
As I was saying, that's it for now. We will probably do, I think, a pod before the new year, hopefully to wrap up those games before the new year comes in. Yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us, and do watch, listen, like, subscribe everywhere you watch us and listen to us. That'd be great. Until not quite New Year, but just before, guys. We'll see you then.
See you later.
See ya.
Cheers.